Discover the one shocking sentence from a black waiter that transformed a billionaire and the empty life that followed it. David Green sat in a small Manhattan diner, the incessant clatter of dishes and the greasy aroma of fried food washing over him like a jarring splash of cold water. He was ensconced in a vinyl booth, miles away from his high-rise office, a gilded cage where he ruled with authority and ruthlessness. But here, he was just another man, alone and submerged in the weight of his choices. Over the years, he had amassed a fortune that clamored for attention, yet the louder it rang, the more hollow it felt. Another day had come and gone, filled with boardroom battles and calculated betrayals, but tonight, the emptiness gnawed at him like a relentless hunger. Marcus, a dedicated waiter juggling trays overflowing with comfort food, caught the billionaire's eye for just a moment. A smile flickered on Marcus's face, bright enough to pierce David's uncaring facade. It was a rare light in the starlit gloom of his world, a small, human moment that temporarily shielded him from his demons. As Marcus approached his table, David didn't expect the words that would hit like a thunderclap, unmasking all he had buried. You know, at the end of the day, family will always matter more than money. David froze. The statement hung in the air, its simplicity stinging more than he anticipated, echoing through the hollow chambers of his soul. Family. How long had it been since he felt a warm embrace or shared laughter? In the chase for wealth, he'd discarded relationships and family bonds like remnants of yesterday's dinner plates. He embraced his relentless ambition, but now doubts crept in, whispering throughout his mind, was it worth it? The atmosphere around him thickened as he grappled with the ramifications of those words. As silence descended upon the table like a shroud, tension tightened around David's chest. He could almost hear the clinking of ice in his glass, the distant laughter of a couple celebrating love, while his mind spiraled into chaotic disarray. Who had he become? His colleagues, forever optimistic at his expense, whispered warnings of his softening resolve. He could practically feel their sharpened knives ready to sink deep, ready to declare that David Green was losing his edge. On the other side of the diner, Marcus deftly moved between tables, laughing at the foolery of life while his thoughts churned with concern for his siblings, mouths to feed, dreams to fulfill amidst long shifts. The strain of survival pressed down on him, yet amid that burden, there lay a resilience, a flicker of hope. In comparison to his relentless spirit, David felt heavy, a weary giant lost in the ruins of hollow success. Suddenly, the phone in David's pocket buzzed, vibrating like a sledgehammer in the silence of his introspection. The ringer cut through his crisis like a sharp blade, demanding his attention but also promising to pull him back to the very life he was questioning. He hesitated, the weight of the device in his hand feeling like an anchor dragging him back into the murky depths from which he sought to rise. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let us continue. The phone continued to vibrate, a persistent reminder of his prior life barely held together by fragile strings of ambition. Could he really abandon the cutthroat world that had granted him affectionless success? The unpredictability of this moment collided with the sobering reality that maybe, just maybe, true fulfillment came from understanding the very essence that Marcus had pointed out: family, love, connection. The heart of his internal conflict throbbed painfully, like an itch he couldn't reach. David sat on the precipice of his own reckoning, but would he be able to leap into the unknown world of belonging, or would he retreat into the safety of power? Just then, the buzz quieted abruptly, leaving a deafening stillness, and David's eyes widened, a new call popping up onto the screen. Who called at this hour? What awaited him? The visceral tension thickened, holding him captive under its grasp, leaving the outcome suspended in the air like an unanswered prayer. David stared at the phone, heartbeat quickening, fingers poised yet trembling over the screen. Questions flooded his mind as he battled the urge to simply silence the call and resume his introspection. What did it mean to answer, to invite the chaos of his old life back in? With a deep breath, his thumb swiped across the screen, accepting the unknown. David. The voice on the other end was sharp, urgent, a stark contrast to the contemplative stillness of the diner. It was Hannah, his executive assistant, her tone woven with threads of both irritation and concern. You missed the quarterly meeting. You need to address the team. They're starting to talk. The term, starting to talk, pierced through his growing resolve like a serrated knife. He could already picture the skeptical faces of his colleagues, the ones who had risen alongside him but now sensed a shift. The vultures circling, waiting to feast on his perceived weakness. I'll be there shortly, he replied, though the words felt unmoored half-hearted. As the call ended, David felt suffocated by the weight of expectation. With Marcus's words echoing in his ears, he rose from the booth, the diner's fluorescent lights harsh against his thoughts. He left behind the warmth and comfort that had wrapped around him as he put one foot in front of the other, heading back into the bustling streets of Manhattan, littered with glimmers of his past life. The harshness of the city felt starker than usual. The glass towers loomed above like gaping mouths, ready to swallow him whole. Each step toward his office felt like dragging himself through quicksand, as he contemplated his choices. Each fleeting moment of connection he'd avoided, the countless dinners missed, the birthday parties where he'd been a ghost, left a lingering reminder of what he had chosen over personal ties. David reached the towering building, the lobby bustling with employees, but he felt like an outsider peering into a strange world. A storm brewed inside him, a battle between the ambition that had driven him to this stature and the nagging truth that perhaps it had come at too high a cost. As he climbed the elevator, he recalled moments of laughter shared with family, fleeting snapshots of joy that flickered past his mental screen, each one followed by a sharp pang of loss. The voices of his childhood, the celebration of small victories, the magic he had once taken for granted, stomped through his mind like an angry mob demanding attention. A single image broke through, his daughter, Sam, her laughter ringing in his ears like a soft melody, one that had all but faded into silence over the years. The elevator doors slid open with a crisp ding, and David stepped into the boardroom, greeted by a sea of expectant faces. He observed their ready pen strokes, poised to note every fluctuation in his demeanor. Instantly, he felt the pressure constrict him, deathly quiet and stifling. It invited him to return to his old self, but he was painfully aware that he would be playing a part he no longer cherished. For a fleeting moment, he opened his mouth, the familiar rehearsed lines veering on the edge of his consciousness, but a far more powerful voice crept forth. What if we take a different approach? His own audacity shocked him as the words sliced through his carefully constructed exterior. For the first time, he could sense the shift. He was not just a face at the table but a more complex version of himself yearning for transformation. Would he dare? Would he challenge the way his company's values had been driven purely by profits? Before him lay the opportunity to reshape not only his destiny, but that of his colleagues too. Could this be the first step toward realigning not just his life, but the very fabric of the company that had defined him? As the eyes of his team centered on him, a sudden chill gripped him, a whisper from the past urging him to retreat. But he stood tall, pulse racing, ready to plunge headlong into uncertainty, unaware of the consequences that awaited him. The moment had arrived to confront not just his board, but his own priorities. Would he embrace the discomfort of vulnerability, or fold under the weight of expectation? There was a choice to be made, immense and fragile. A new beginning hung just within reach. And as he began to speak, the question loomed larger than ever: would he be able to confront the ghosts of his past that had led him to this pivotal moment? David's heart raced as the words echoed in the boardroom, reverberating off the stark white walls laden with muted corporate ambition. What if we take a different approach? The silence that followed felt both liberating and damning. He stood on the precipice of a decision that could redefine not only his career but the values of the company he had built. The tension was palpable, eyebrows arched and pens shifted nervously in hands. His colleagues had never heard such rhetoric from him before. Ambition had always been couched in numbers and bottom lines, yet here he was, challenging the status quo. Questions flashed through the minds of his team: was he losing control? Was he becoming soft? But what they didn't know was that he had finally begun to question the very fabric of their fiscal success. As he scanned their faces, he saw a blend of skepticism and intrigue. It was a pivotal moment, one that demanded a deeper commitment not just to the company's profit margins but to a more profound vision of community, purpose, and integrity. David considered how those values had slipped through the cracks of his relentless pursuit for success, leading to hollow accolades and empty troughs of achievement. Let us consider social responsibility, not just obligation, he continued, his voice steadying. We live in a world that craves connection. It's time our strategies align with actions that benefit our employees and, more importantly, the communities in which we operate. He could see a flicker of surprise in their eyes, a ripple of uncertainty. Would they understand? Would they embrace, or would they resist? David had spent years underestimating the collective potential of his team, clinging to an illusion of control. Now, he had invited them into a conversation instead of giving directives and uncomfortable vulnerability that might foster real ownership of their shared journey. Then came Hannah's voice from the back, steady but inquisitive. Do you think this is the right time to pivot? We're already facing market pressures. Her concern propelled him into a deeper self-assessment. Was he truly ready to rattle their foundations, to risk what they had built for the sake of something more uncertain? I believe it's perhaps the most critical time, he answered, fueled by an adrenaline rush that felt foreign yet invigorating. We've been so focused on immediate survival, the culture we cultivate affects profitability more than we've realized. The dialogue opened like a flower breaking through the frost. A few nodded, murmuring in quiet agreement. Momentum began to swell, each idea layered with potential solutions, each voice contributing to a newfound sense of agency. They began discussing ways to implement sustainability initiatives, explore ethical sourcing, and revamp employee engagement policies, yet, just as exhilaration took root, David felt an unsettling prick of fear. Successful change required more than spirited conversation, it demanded alterations in practices and resources, inevitably exposing cracks in the company's tradition. He too, like his peers, would have to grapple with resistance, both from within the boardroom and himself. A past version of David would have shunned any notion of risk, scoffing at the idea of compromising financial gains for ideals. But this felt different. Teetering between ambition and ethical integrity, he questioned, was this the rebirth of a leader or merely an image masking a deeper personal turmoil? As he refocused on the faces around the table, all eyes burning with a blend of skepticism and curiosity, David felt a decisive clarity. The journey to transformation was not merely systemic, it required a liaison within him. If he was to challenge the narrative, he'd need to inspire conviction, activate change, and shoulder the weight of that responsibility. There was no turning back now. The ghosts of his personal experience had awakened something raw yet hopeful. He had ignited a crucial dialogue, but the volatile nature of progress lay ahead. Did he have the fortitude to face the potential fallout? With a deep inhalation, he prepared to navigate uncharted waters, each stroke of courage propelled by the desire for genuine redemption, both personally and professionally. As his mind sifted through the myriad of possibilities, he understood that this was only the beginning of a much broader confrontation. Perhaps it's time we all face our own ghosts, he said, leaning heavier into the moment as a hush fell over the room. And forge a path, one that honors where we've come from and where we're willing to go. And there it was, the challenge posed not just to his team but to himself. Would he embrace this clash of ideals, or would he retreat back to the safety of mere ambition? The question flickered like a flame, drawing forth the uncertainties lurking just beneath the surface. The boardroom had fallen silent, each member wrapped in their own contemplation of David's challenge. The moment felt monumental, yet he was acutely aware of how fragile that momentum could be. Could this spark ignite a fire of change, or would it extinguish under scrutiny? David glanced at the clock. Time seemed to stretch into an infinity filled with possibility and trepidation. What comes next? He wondered internally. Would his proposal lead them to a new ethic that prioritized depth and moral weight over the superficial numbers that once defined their success? He had to quell the spinning thoughts threatening to shake his resolve. As the discussion continued, he was struck by a sense of urgency. He realized that it wasn't just a company they were discussing, it was lives intertwined, each element of their vision impacting real people. With renewed conviction, he interjected. Understanding the human aspect of our business isn't an add-on. It's vital to our strategic vision. Hannah's earlier warning echoed. The irony lay in the fact that while they faced external pressures, they were, right here, in a rapid inner turmoil. Would they embrace this holistic view of their enterprise or mark it as an erratic detour? He took a breath, trying to capture the energy flowing around him, hoping to channel it into a forward motion. What about creating an internal task force? The idea punched through his hesitation, a solution rising out of a desire not just to react but to act decisively. A group committed to integrating our ethical goals into every department. Each project could align with the principles we're discussing today. Eyes widened. Whispers intertwined with exchanged glances. This was more than an abstract notion, this would require accountability, diligence, and a collaborative spirit. He could see resistance skimming the surface as they weighed the implications of such involvement. David's heart raced. He sensed that a critical threshold had been crossed, so many years spent in a singular mindset were now colliding with a newly discovered ethos. His thoughts raced ahead. A task force would mean difficult conversations, the dismantling of outdated practices that had defined their identity for far too long. Could he summon the strength to lead that charge? Across the room, Hannah shifted. I think that's ambitious, but who would spearhead it? And will it dilute our current objectives? That was a question David had anticipated, a question he needed to confront. I'll lead it, he declared, his voice stronger than he felt. But I'll need all of you. The revelation that he would have to rely on collective trust imposed a deeper sense of vulnerability. In its core lay a challenge not only for his colleagues but also for him. Leadership was no longer about unilateral control, it was about fostering a collaborative environment where every voice mattered. In that moment, David faced a mirror of his past self, one who thrived on authority, who feared consensus. A flicker of doubt invaded his mind. Would he truly be capable of inviting more voices into the conversation? Wouldn't he that reveal more of his limitations rather than bolstering his reputation? The silence morphed into a charged atmosphere, the kind that leaves one feeling exposed. He pushed back against that fear. Transformative change could not happen in isolation. It needed his team, the very people he had once viewed through a lens of hierarchy now regarded as collaborators on this new flight towards purposeful ethics. As momentum built, they brainstormed practical steps to engage the task force, envisioning community partnerships and ethical sourcing that reflected their new philosophy. Each suggestion seemed to reinforce a collectively desired future, yet unease festered within him regarding potential pushbacks outside their walls. With the discussion spiraling into hopeful possibilities, David realized another significant shift was occurring. The specter of his own fears shrank in the face of a growing desire for real change. The tension between doubt and determination loomed large. The meeting drew to a close with tentative enthusiasm. David left feeling invigorated yet anxious. The promise of evolution lingered, but so did the specter of dissent. As the door clicked shut behind him, a cold wave of reality swept through him. The excitement of possibility also signaled the oncoming trials. What would the reactions from the board be when confronted with the prospect of change? Could they wrestle with the fear of deviating from familiar pathways, or would they cling to remnants of an antiquated business model? He caught a glimpse of the waning daylight filtering through the windows. The path ahead was clearer, but the shadows of doubt were far from banished. Would he have the courage to lead his team, despite the inevitable challenges ahead? David took a deep breath as he prepared to confront the hurdles of implementation. He now understood that both personal and professional transformations demanded not just vision, but relentless commitment. With a hammering heart, he stepped onto that unwalked path, ready to face whatever awaited. David arrived back at his office, his mind racing with the weight of the proposal he had just laid out. The excitement still pulsed within him, but amid that thrill was a deep-seated anxiety. He sank into his chair, staring blankly at the scattered documents on his desk, the chaos mirroring his thoughts. The words task force echoed in his head, reverberating with the gravity of responsibility they bore. There was no longer a comforting wall between him and the inevitable pushback. He had stepped into a role that required self-examination, honesty, and the willingness to embrace discomfort. David recognized that leading a task force was merely the beginning. His personal transformation hinged on navigating the trials ahead with grace. That he pulled out a notebook, an attempt to organize his thoughts. As he scribbled ideas for his first task force meeting, doubt crept in. Who was he to lead this initiative? He had spent years climbing the corporate ladder, not as a collaborator but as a command-bearer. The very act of stripping away authority felt dangerously revolutionary, yet he could not dismiss the flicker of conviction igniting within. His phone buzzed, jolting him from his spiraling thoughts. It was Hannah. "We need to talk. When you have a moment." There was a heaviness in her text, one he couldn't ignore. He checked the time and replied with a quick "now works." As soon as he hit send, he felt the pressure build in his chest. What was she thinking? The potential for dissent not merely from the board but from his closest allies loomed larger than before. Within minutes, Hannah knocked softly before entering. Her eyes were piercing, a mixture of concern and admiration. "You really stirred the pot today," she said, taking a seat opposite him. "Yeah, I'm still grappling with it," he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "I know it won't be easy." "Easy? That's an understatement." She leaned in. "We're venturing into territory that's untested for management. What happens if they push back? I suppose we can anticipate some resistance. Change isn't comfortable, especially among those who have benefited from the existing structure." "Exactly." Hannah's brow furrowed. "And what if they reject the very idea of a task force? What if they see it as an unnecessary bureaucratic layer?" Her questions were sharp, yet they compelled him to confront the reality he was skirting around. He needed to anticipate backlash, not retreat into cynicism, but prepare himself to confront it. "If that happens, I guess I'll have to make my case." "Your case? You'll need more than just a PowerPoint. You'll need compelling narrative stories from employees whose jobs are directly affected," she prompted, her voice steady. "It's about aligning this change with personal experiences." The pressure of her words settled over him. "So I should gather testimonials? Actual human experiences?" "Precisely," she urged. "People need to see the why through real stories. Why this task force matters, how it impacts their lives. It can't just be a corporate shift." Suddenly, a new strategy ignited in him. What began as merely gathering a task force could evolve into a grassroots movement within the company. Instead of approaching it top-down, he could amplify voices from every level. "Do you think people would be open to sharing?" he asked, cautiously hopeful. "Very likely. You'll find employees who want to be heard. But you need to create a safe space for that voice to emerge, especially from those least likely to speak up." The implications of her words bore heavy on him. If he was to lead authentically, he required the courage to expose his vulnerabilities and prioritize a culture of openness. As the conversation deepened, David recognized the fundamental shift was not just a strategy but a new understanding of leadership. It meant stepping back, inviting participation, and cultivating trust. In the crucible of opposition, he could forge a new identity as a leader. When Hannah left, David felt a newfound determination swell within him. He had crossed a threshold, an invitation to challenge his prior selves and academic notions of leadership. The task force wasn't just an initiative, it could signify a transformation of corporate culture itself. Yet, looming questions remained: how would they confront resistance? Would his colleagues embrace or reject this new vision? With a mix of anticipation and anxiety, David steeled himself. Tomorrow would require preparation, strategy, and perhaps a touch of humility. Yet, in those complexities lay the promise of profound personal growth, the kind he had once only read about in case studies. That he placed his hand over his heart, feeling its steady rhythm. The future echoed with possibilities, and David knew the road ahead was riddled with uncertainty. Empowering others could become his most significant challenge yet, but one thing was certain: this was his moment to courageously confront doubts and step into the leader he aspired to be. with that resolve firm within him, David picked up his notebook once more, drafting the outline for a meeting that would change everything. What stories would emerge, and how would his team react? Only time would tell if they could all emerge stronger, together. David awoke the next morning with a sense of urgency that pushed him out of bed. The gravity of the day ahead settled into his bones. He wasn't just preparing for a meeting, he was embarking on what could be a turning point in his career, and perhaps his life. The echoes of Hannah's words about creating a safe space resonated like a mantra in his mind. How could he ensure people felt comfortable enough to voice their experiences, their feelings, their fears? He arrived early at the office, the quiet hum of machinery and distant chatter stirring his thoughts. Abruptly confronted by the daunting task ahead, his anxiety flickered like a candle caught in a draft. Yet beneath that flicker was a flame of determination. He began organizing a structured meeting agenda but found himself stalling when mapping out the narrative. He needed to pull together convincing stories, but gathering those would require more than just a simple request for feedback. He needed to engage on a deeper level. The first decision came to him unexpectedly. He would not just address the group, he would listen openly to their experiences. To kick off the meeting, he decided he would share a personal anecdote and experience from his past that had shaped how he viewed ambition and determination. He hoped that his vulnerability would inspire others to open up. As he crafted his story, David felt the impacts of his choices swirl around him. He reflected on his journey through the corporate world, filled with calculated moves and relentless ambition, often at the expense of deeper connections. Had he built walls around himself? He realized that to foster an atmosphere of inclusivity, he first had to remove his armor. When the clock struck 10, David stood before the group in the conference room. The walls felt both comforting and suffocating as he cast a glance around the room, taking in the mixed expressions of skepticism and hope on the faces of his colleagues. He plunged into his story, recounting moments of failure, uncertainty, and the challenge of being seen as just a title. He laid bare the raw edges of his journey, hopeful it would resonate. As he finished, the room felt heavy with contemplation. He surveyed their faces, intrigued, cautious, as if they were weighing their own responses in tandem. He took a breath, preparing to guide them into sharing their experiences. "Now, I want to hear from all of you," he began tentatively, attempting to break the invisible barrier that seemed to suffocate them. "What are your thoughts on our current systems? And what changes do you envision?" Silence blanketed the room. David could feel the weight of unspoken stories hanging in the air. He pressed on. "This is a safe space. We're all in it together. I genuinely want to understand how you experience our work environment." One by one, hesitant voices began to emerge. Employee after employee shared their frustrations, their hopes, and their visions. As they spoke, an unexpected wave of empowerment washed over him. David's fears about resonance began to dissolve, replaced by a collective spirit igniting among the team. Vulnerability was slowly rewriting the narrative, yet, each revelation unveiled the specter of resistance that would inevitably come. The skepticism of senior management remained an intangible yet turbulent force. Would those in power truly heed the experiences shared in this room? "There's a lot of potential here," Hannah's words echoed in him, reminding him of the grassroots approach they had discussed. David felt his resolve strengthening, but on the horizon loomed the reality of upcoming confrontations. After the meeting concluded, a wave of inspiration coursed through the room, but David couldn't shake off the feeling of impending conflict with their management. With this new momentum, he needed to find allies among the senior leadership, and quickly. Time was not a luxury he had. As he flipped through his notebook, strategizing, he realized the challenge was poised to escalate. He was stepping into uncharted territory, where persistent doubts mingled with conviction, requiring him to navigate both personal fears and professional opposition. David closed his notebook with a definitive slam, determination brewing within. He had unearthed a new layer to leadership, a place of authenticity, influence, and alliance. The stakes were higher than ever. It was time to confront not only the task force's immediate challenges but also the hierarchical mindset of the board that still had the potential to undermine everything he sought to build. The time had come to face the very people he once thought were his allies, but would they embrace this emerging vision, or would they try to crush it before it even began? David spent the weekend pondering his next move. He felt invigorated by the recent meeting, yet a cloud of anxiety loomed over him as he recognized the imminent need for strategic engagement with senior leadership. His previous experiences replayed in his mind the ambivalence, the ire he had faced as a junior employee when suggesting even small changes. There was a stark difference now. He was positioned as an advocate for a new culture. This internal conflict weighed heavily on him. The triumphs of the meeting clashed with the grim reality of past encounters with power. Could he really challenge a system he had once reluctantly accepted? Would he recall the strength he had drawn from his team to present a case that could either rally or alienate the very decision-makers controlling his future? He spent Monday evaluating each senior leader's personality, identifying their fears as well as their ambitions. Building relationships had always come naturally to him, but now he needed to enhance that skill strategically. Instead of faking camaraderie, David resolved to forefront genuine engagement. It became evident, he could not simply present issues. He needed to enkindle shared enthusiasm for change. As he walked into a casual lunch with Lisa, head of human resources, he felt an electric charge of possibility. Myers, the chief financial officer, was known for his skepticism, but Lisa could be an ally. She had once discussed her own challenges in transforming HR culture and was often the liaison between departments. David had witnessed her capacity to inspire, but he needed a solid plan to win her to his cause. Lisa, David said as they sat down, carefully choosing his tone, I wanted to share some thoughts from our last meeting. Her eyes lit up with interest, the corners of her mouth twitching into a smile, but it quickly flipped into concern. You know how it is with the board. They expect us to maintain the status quo. They might not welcome these discussions on culture. He appreciated her honesty but felt an urgent need to pivot this conversation away from fear. I hear you. But what if we approached this differently? What if we share our insights with the board not just as compliance issues but as vital shifts that could drive our company forward? Lisa leaned back, processing his words. You know that doesn't always matter to them. They look at hard numbers. Numbers are important, I get that. But people are more than metrics. What if we bring stories? Anecdotes that highlight the impact of our culture on productivity? Isn't that compelling enough for them? In the midst of their exchange, David sensed the indifference of management slipping just a fraction. The barrier of doubt lessened as they each shared experiences and memories of team successes and failures. He began weaving storytelling into their discourse, illustrating how a strong culture could lead to tangible results, profitability, even sustainability. As Lisa seemed increasingly intrigued, he pressed on with newfound confidence. If we can simply deliver the message clearly and share these narratives authentically, they might just see the broader picture. David could feel tension bubbling beneath the surface as she considered his perspective. Yet he couldn't help but anticipate resistance. What if her enthusiasm was a fleeting moment? Would she stand by him when challenged? That evening, as he prepared for another round of meetings, David mapped out an undeniable strategy. He would gather a small coalition of allies from different departments, individuals willing to share their perspectives and insights in a unified front. They would construct a narrative that illustrated change as a necessary and urgent step. Determination flared inside him. Each line he penned felt invigorating as he put together an agenda packed not just with proposals but with voices. The hesitations that plagued him earlier melted away, only to be replaced with gritty determination. He was no longer just a participant but a leader of a movement. Yet, the greatest confrontation loomed ahead. How would the board respond to an organized front that challenged their authority? Initially buoyant with an exhilarating blend of excitement and anxiety, David acknowledged a curious reality. The time for fear was over. Now, each word he wrote carried the potential to reshape not just his future, but that of his colleagues as well. There was no turning back. As he tucked his notebook away for the night, one thought consumed him: did he have what it took to confront the powers that be head-on, all while remaining true to the newfound culture they had begun to cultivate? David hardly slept that night, his mind swirling with possibilities and potential outcomes. Each scenario played out like scenes from a film, interwoven with moments of doubt and determination. The clock ticked relentlessly, urging him toward decisions that felt monumental. He knew the next day would be crucial. A meeting was scheduled with Lisa and a few other allies he had cautiously approached about his budding initiative. As day broke, he awakened with purpose, yet felt the weight of apprehension lingering. He dressed with intention, opting for a blazer that exuded competence but still reflected the essence of his style, approachable yet professional. In the conference room, he found himself surrounded by familiar faces, but today they appeared charged with varying degrees of enthusiasm and skepticism. Lisa exuded a warm confidence, a reminder of the encouragement he had drawn from their last discussion. Beside her, a couple of colleagues had agreed to join: Emily from marketing, known for her flair in creative storytelling, and Jason from IT, a data analyst with a mind for metrics. They exchanged polite greetings, but David's attention swiftly turned to the agenda he had crafted. It was time to present his vision. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice steady despite the rapid beat of his heart. "We're at a pivotal moment, not just for our organization, but for how we define our culture. I believe we have a chance to present a narrative that will resonate beyond numbers and statistics." He could feel the group's collective tension dissipating slightly as he continued: "Let us connect our experiences, the moments that illustrate how our culture has influenced productivity and morale. We can convey that to the board not as a list of grievances, but as a compelling story of transformation." Emily, quick to seize the opportunity, chimed in: "What if we weave in case studies from our departments, showing how specific cultural initiatives have led to tangible results?" Her eyes sparkled with the prospect of collaboration, and David felt a surge of validation. "Yes!" David exclaimed, surprised by his own fervor. "Every department has a story. If we could pull together these narratives, we could craft a compelling presentation that not only delineates our challenges but showcases our potential." Jason hesitated, shifting in his seat. "It's a solid idea, David, but how will we ensure that we aren't just preaching to the choir? The board might not buy into anecdotes without the backing of hard data." David anticipated the question and had prepared for it. "What if we combine both? Each story can have accompanying metrics that validate its impact, a blend of qualitative and quantitative insights. We tell them the why and back it up with the how." As the dialogue flowed, David observed the shifts in their expressions. The initial hesitance was transforming into curiosity and perhaps, hope. He was leading not from a place of superiority, but as a facilitator of collective growth. It was a latent leadership quality he hadn't tapped into before, one that intertwined passion with strategic thinking. The meeting culminated with a collaborative commitment to draft their presentation. As they left, he felt an invigorating sense of purpose radiating within him. For the first time, he was no longer just an employee looking for approval, he was a catalyst for change. Yet, lurking beneath that excitement remained an unsettled question: how would they respond to this grassroots initiative at the board level? Later that evening, he replayed the meeting in his mind, savoring the excitement but grappling with the underlying uncertainties. There was an exhilarating momentum to their plan, but he could sense the storm clouds looming ahead. What if the leaders resisted? What if their stories fell flat against the cold pragmatism of the board? He needed to be prepared for any backlash, but also resilient enough to embrace the challenge. As he contemplated this potential confrontation, one thought repeated insistently: he had to stand firm in his belief that genuine cultural change was not just desirable but essential for their success. As he closed his laptop, he realized the true challenge was not solely about presenting their case, it was about forging a path forward amidst inevitable resistance. He felt a steely resolve settle in. The stakes were high, and with it came the anticipation of confrontations, both external and within himself. The moment of reckoning was approaching. Could he face the board alone if needed, advocating for change amidst their entrenched authority? David spent the following days submerged in preparation, researching case studies and gathering insights from across departments. The walls of his small cubicle became a canvas of notes and diagrams. Each hour was punctuated by a blend of excitement and dread as he anticipated the presentation before the board. As he worked, the enormity of what he was undertaking began to crystallize, pulling him into an introspective spiral. His conversations with Lisa, Emily, and Jason became strategic workshops where they sculpted their narratives with care. David found himself often questioning his perception of leadership. Every story he chose to elevate became a reflection of the team's individuality, but deeper still, it pushed him to confront how he viewed his own role in the organization. In one brainstorming session, as Emily shared a poignant story about a challenging project collaboration, David noticed his gut response, an instinctive urge to jump in with his perspective, to add. But he paused, allowing space for her to finish and realizing he was learning the art of listening. The day before their meeting with the board, David felt a surge of anxiety. He considered calling an emergency huddle, but instead, he allowed his team's confidence to surface. They had crafted something meaningful together, he needed to trust in their collective efforts. That afternoon, as they ran through their presentation, David's mind momentarily drifted back to his early days with the company, days filled with self-doubt and a desire for validation. He had always focused on not making mistakes rather than championing ideas. But now, a vision of what they could accomplish fueled him forward. He was becoming more than just a participant, he was a key stakeholder in cultural evolution. The night before the presentation, sleep eluded him once again. Instead, he watched the busy streets outside his apartment. The city pulsed with life, mirrors of ambition reflecting both struggle and success. As he prepared to rest, he found himself grappling with an intrinsic fear. What if he faltered in front of the board? Would they see him as just another voice among many, or could he actually captivate them with his vision? Doubt crept in as he ruminated on his past failures, urging him to retreat into familiar territory. Yet underneath, a newfound strength flickered. This was not merely about him, it was about the stories and lives of his colleagues, the courage they had instilled in him, and the potential for change, the very catalyst that had brought them together. The following day, he donned his blazer again, reminding himself that this was a performance. It was an invitation for the board to embrace a narrative that could reshape their organization. As he anxiously awaited the start of the meeting, a thought throbbed in his mind. Was he ready to embrace not just the triumphs but also the criticisms that might surface? Perhaps it wasn't about winning the approval of authority figures but about establishing a dialogue that could bridge gaps. He took a deep breath, steadying himself against the tide of uncertainty washing over him. This was the moment where he could choose to step into a more authentic version of himself, not just as an employee but as a leader. And just as the board members began to enter the room, a new realization hit him like a tidal wave. He wouldn't be just advocating for change, he would be invoking a revolution in understanding. Would they be open to interpreting their successes through a lens of culture as much as performance? The tension lingered in the air, each second stretching into an eternity. David grasped the folder tightly in his hands, the combined stories and metrics ready to spill forth like a torrent. But in that split moment, he understood what lay ahead would challenge not only their perceptions but also his own convictions about who he'd become in the process. The time had come to face the board and perhaps, most daunting of all, the truths within himself. David entered the boardroom, heart pounding and palms slicked with perspiration. Gone was the confident titan who had ruled with unwavering authority. Today, he felt vulnerable yet resolute, preparing to battle not only for his vision but also for the rebirth of who he had become. As he stood before the board, David felt the weight of countless eyes fixate on him, skepticism mingling with intrigue. He took a breath, recalling the shared experiences he'd gathered, the passion that had radiated from his colleagues, and the human element he was about to introduce into the corporate narrative. He spoke, voice steady yet raw, as he delivered his opening line. Today, I'm not just here to discuss metrics and profits. I'm here to introduce a richer narrative, one that connects our corporate achievements to the lives we impact. From board member to board member, he saw eyebrows arching and pens poised, ready to dismiss or embrace the unfolding ideas. David dove deep into the stories, anecdotes from individuals across departments whose lives were affected by the corporate culture he had once taken for granted. Each story, woven with authenticity, painted a vivid picture of resilience, innovation, and community. Hearing the voices of his peers resonated deeply, each word serving as a reminder that they were more than numbers on a balance sheet. That he saw some board members shift uncomfortably as he recounted moments of frustration and triumph, the stark realities of employees striving for recognition within a system that often overlooked them. With his voice rising with conviction, he delivered the heart of the matter. Yes, we have financial targets to meet, but the greatest asset we possess is our people. Let's not just chase profits, let us cultivate a culture that empowers and inspires. For a moment, silence engulfed the room like a dense fog. David's confidence swelled as he sensed the tide shifting. He had transcended the barriers of mere presentation. He ventured further, knowing he had put himself on the line, realizing this was the culmination of his personal journey, a confrontation with his fears, weaknesses, and ultimate realization of identity as a leader. Then came a challenge from Myers, the CFO, his expression skeptical yet curious. "David, how do you intend to align these ideas with our current objectives? You propose a task force embracing culture. How does that translate to profitability?" David welcomed the scrutiny, heart racing but mind clear. "Here's the opportunity. By investing in culture, we'll not only improve employee morale, which studies show correlates with productivity and creativity, but we'll attract and retain top talent, ultimately impacting our bottom line significantly." He showcased metrics derived from his research, linking positive corporate culture to enhanced financial performance. Murmurs rippled through the room as David transformed the earlier fears of confrontation into a rallying cry. Let us create a sustainable vision that intertwines ethical practices with monetary gains. I propose we work together to redefine success, intertwining profitability with a nurturing community focus, he urged passionately, drawing from the very essence of his transformations. By the end of the meeting, he could see the initial skepticism in board members' expressions transform into contemplation. While not every member was convinced, he had stimulated a dialogue that began to bridge their ingrained ideologies with emerging values. He left the boardroom feeling triumphant, not merely for the fight he had waged but for the new friendships forged with individuals who had underestimated him before. Days turned into weeks, and as the proposal for a cultural task force materialized, David felt the resonance of gradual victories. Colleagues began discussing the implications seriously. Leaders in the company started looking beyond traditional metrics, examining their impact on employees and their wider communities. The pivotal moment came when he received an email acknowledging the board's decision to support the formation of the task force he had proposed, officially launching a new initiative aimed at nurturing corporate culture while upholding fiscal accountability. This was not just a professional achievement, it was a transformative triumph, a definitive moment of unfair recognition for a man who had wrestled with power and vulnerability. David felt grounded and self-assured as he now balanced authority with empathy, recognized not just for his financial acumen but for fostering a movement toward genuine connection. In embracing vulnerability, he had discovered strength. The faces that once mirrored skepticism now reflected inquiry and aspiration. He was no longer merely a corporate titan, he had become a catalyst for change, embodying both courage and authenticity. In his newfound energy, David made time to reconnect with his family, eager to expand his sense of connection beyond the corporate walls. Earlier voids filled with the warmth of laughter and genuine engagement brought him the fulfillment he had been chasing so relentlessly. It was not merely the accolade that marked his success, but the reimagining of life's priorities that defined true beginnings. As the sun set over the Manhattan skyline, casting vibrant hues across the horizon, David looked toward the future. He had transformed and now, empowered him. The echoes of collaboration and promise rang louder than any boardroom rift ever could. You need to subscribe now to ensure you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories that redefine the boundaries of personal success. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, your support matters more than ever. Comment your reactions and theories about this powerful ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this incredible transformation. Your action can inspire others to embrace change just like David did.